Okay, so this is going to be my review of the ZMF Auteur Teak Edition. And before getting into this review, I want to give you a bit of context on the purchasing experience of or just getting into a ZMF headphone. And this is different from pretty much every single other headphone company out there. You typically, for headphones, you either buy them online or you go to a store and you listen to them and you like it and you pick it up and off you go. And those headphones, every other headphone out there, just about, is, it's designed, then it hits the assembly line, it's mass-produced, quality control, and out the door it goes. Whereas the ZMF Auteur, you buy the headphone and they build it for you. And so there's a much more personal, handcrafted approach to this. And as a result, every headphone is going to have, at least in how it looks, something slightly different about it. So here, you can see it's real wood. This is teak wood. But the grain is going to be slightly different. There's going to be little tiny imperfections here and there that you see where it's not uniform. The pads are going to be, also not uniform, slightly different, from one set to another set. And that's just the nature of the sort of small batch production cycle that ZMF employs. And this, might change in the future, if they ramp up production, if they get bigger, which they should. It would be awesome to see. However, at the current moment, it's a very small number that he produces. And I think the result is awesome. So what is this? So this is a custom biocellulose driver in here. It's 300 ohms, and it's housed by, of course, teak wood. And then you have this, I don't even know what the material is. It's lambskin or sheepskin or something like that. But basically, they're the ZMF pads, which are very well known. Excellent quality. And then we got this cable actually is the new upgrade cable. This is a Litz copper, I believe. And I'll get into the cable in a little bit here because that's a different subject. But for the moment, let's just talk about the headphone. This is also an open back design, so you can see the grill here. It's open. There is some cloth or foam material behind that, but it's non-resonant as far as I understand. And then you can see there's holes here. Apparently, these holes are not actually for sound to escape. They're just so that the cup is able to be a little bit more uniform than it would otherwise be, because of course wood, it's not like working with machined aluminum or metal or something like that. It takes on its own properties a little bit, so this allows them to get a little bit more of a standard, and I can't verify that, but because I've only heard this one, but I'm sure that's the case. The build quality is, because it's a unique kind of handcrafted boutique company, the build quality is going to, you might notice those imperfections. However, the build quality is absolutely phenomenal on this, and you can see all the care that's gone into the sanding, the finishing, and it looks gorgeous. The design for the headband and the yokes and everything it's really simplistic. However, it's awesome. Like I can't understand why other companies can't figure out something like this, because this is you put it on and it's like they just sit there perfectly. It's not overdone in the clamp force, and it is customizable too. You can change, bend the headband and change the clamping force. So I'm very impressed with the build quality, and the comfort is also, as a result of not too much clamp force, it's also outstanding. I do have to mention that this headphone is a bit on the heavy side. When I first was looking at photos of this, even if you just go to the site and you see these photos, it looks beautiful, but it also looks quite bulky and quite big. Certainly, it's the smallest of the ZMF headphones, of the custom driver headphones, and it's also the lightest. However, it's still around 475 grams to 500 grams. So you're looking at a headphone that I remember, years ago when I had the HE500, that was a heavy headphone. And I told myself never again am I going to go with something that's that heavy. Because after a while, like I listen to headphones for 8 hours a day for work, for play. I mean, you guys, if you've watched any of my other videos, you know that I am a comfort freak about this kind of stuff. And so I was initially skeptical of the ability to wear it for long periods of time like I need to. However, what I've just because of the design and the way that the weight is distributed, and the fact that the clamp force is not too tight, makes it so that it really is easy to wear for a long period of time, and you don't notice the 475 grams at all. And combine that with the fact that if you get the upgrade cable, this is really light. Like it way lighter than every other cable that I've had for any other headphones. So the wearing experience of this headphone, like when you just put it on your head, it just floats there. Like it's a totally different. It's not, like other headphones that you get. Sometimes they'll create a seal around your ears, and it's almost like you've been kind of shrink wrapped in the headphones. And this is the complete opposite, where it perfectly just fits on your head, and it just hangs out on your ears, and you don't notice it. Certainly the most comfortable top of the line headphone that I've worn, with one exception, and that is of course the HD800. That's still the comfort king because it is lighter. However, the nice thing about this one is that the ear pads are really, there's a lot of depth to them, to the pads. And actually they give you an extra set of pads. Those are the Icon pads. And we'll talk about that in a little bit because that does change the sound. So for me, comfort gets an A. It's even more comfortable. I'm hesitant to say this. I think it's even more comfortable than the Aeon Flow Open. Just right out of the box, because for me, that one, the clamp force is just a little bit too tight. It's lighter, so maybe if you're like 10 hours in, you don't notice the weight of that one as much. However, I'm absolutely blown away with how comfortable this headphone has been, given that I was skeptical of the 475 grams. Okay, let's get into how it sounds and the technical performance. So because it's a biocellulose driver, that means that it's going to have less distortion than typical Mylar drivers. This is a custom driver. This is not the same, even though it might be the same type as what you find in like a lot of the Fostech stuff or the THX00 from Mastrop. It's a different driver, and the result is it's quite impressive in terms of its technical performance. You get a really dynamic, fast, and punchy headphone that also has extremely good resolution. This is it rivals some of the other top of the line headphones for resolution, at least the ones that are around the same price, and some that are even more expensive. It has the transient response is up there with, I want to say it's the closest to the Andromeda, actually, from Campfire, the IEMs for transient response. Not quite as punchy or not quite as fast as the Aeon Flow stuff. That's just a little bit faster, but it's pretty close. And of course, those are planars, right? So that's a bit unfair. One of the kind of design ideas in this, as far as I understand, is that it's supposed to kind of straddle the line between planar and dynamic, and I think it does exactly that in terms of dynamic punch, transient response, slam, all of those qualities. And the plus side is that you do get really, really good resolution with this. So you're not sacrificing one for the other, really. So it's got macrodynamics galore, good slam, but what I find overall is that the tones are richer, thicker, more full-bodied, and it provides us like a bigger sound. And part of that has to do with the soundstage being bigger. It's I'd say a slightly above average soundstage, certainly better than the Aeon Flow Open, and but it's not like, it doesn't sound like it's artificially wide. It sounds like you're sitting in a room with music in front of you and around you. And so it's not quite that super intimate, like, kind of hugging your face, hugging your head sound. You get a much more open sound, a much more spacious and deep sound. There is this is one of the most interesting things about this headphone. I think it's like, if you're looking into this headphone, the quality that you should appreciate the most about it, or the reason that you should buy it, is that the tones you get are a little bit more on the sweet side. So it's quite neutral, but there is or it's close to neutral. There is a bit of just a tiny bit of resonance to the tones, and that's probably also from the wood cups. And as a result, you get this really rich sounding tone and inviting tone, and it's very engaging, much more so than headphones that might perform like have a bit more technical performance, like the HD800. This one is more engaging and more fun to listen to. We'll get into that with comparisons, but because of that wood resonance, and again, as a result, there's just a slight bit of extra length to the decay. And I find I'm kind of blown away with how they're able to do this, because it sounds like that would make it sound slower, but it doesn't. It sounds right up there. It's way faster than many of my other headphones, and it comes close to that planar speed. So I'm not sure how they're able to get it so that there's a bit of that resonance and decay still, or length, while at the same time retaining speed. But that combination is phenomenal. And yeah, it makes it addictive. Really, like, it's the kind of thing where you start listening to, you just can't take them off. The instrument separation it really depends on the track that you're listening to. Like, if you're listening to something like where things are muddied, or just like it's maybe not the best recording, it's not going to fix the instrument separation for you. Like, if you listen to the same track on HD800, you're going to hear like blackness in between each instrument, for sure. But with this one, you don't quite get that. However, you still get the definition. So I was listening to something that had, I listen to a lot of jazz music that has a lot of like acoustic bass, like upright bass in it. And I was listening to something where it had a very prominent bass line, and I was able to isolate that bass line and listen to that and get the tone from it way better on these than even the Aeon Flow Open, which has superb instrument separation. Even with other high-end comparable headphones that have the same kind of technical performance, the same resolution or better, or instrument separation, transient response, and all of those things, there's still an aspect of, it still feels like you're listening to a representation of the music. You're listening to somebody's microphoned interpretation of what it would sound like if you're listening there, or if you're sitting there. And while that is actually a really good experience, this gets the closest to listening to the Auteur gets the closest to removing those elements from the experience. So rather than listening to a representation of the music, you're just listening to the music. And that's a really unique experience. And part of that, I feel like, again, comes from the design of the wood cups. Remember, wood is porous, so it's going to have totally different properties than if you were to just craft it out of plastic or metal. And it does sound organic and natural. Again, think about instruments, guitars, violins. If you play a note over that, it's going to have resonant properties of the wood. And you don't want too much of that, because you don't want the reverberations to bounce off things and jumble up the sound. However, just a tiny little bit of it gives you that extra euphonic sweetness to the tones, and counteracts whatever even the best microphones would miss. Let's talk about the tonality. And normally that's, again, not the most important thing to me because you can equalize things if you really want to. However, you probably don't want to with this because you don't need to. This is the closest to neutral. This is neutral just with just a tiny little breath of warmth. So think Campfire Andromeda. It's got pretty much the same tonality as that, just with a tiny bit less brightness. And some people even found that Andromeda to be a little bit too bright. And I can understand why, especially if you're using certain types of DACs. But let's get into, let's go through the whole spectrum. So the bass is tight, controlled. I mean, all the sort of things you would expect. It's not as emphasized as something like the Aeon Flow Open. Certainly not as emphasized in the mid and upper bass as, some of those more mid-fi cans that kind of bleed into the mid-range. So there's none of that. And that really does bring out, some of those really nice qualities of bass tracks that you like. Again, upright acoustic bass, and allows you to just really hone in and focus on those lines if you want to. The mid-range is probably my favorite aspect of the headphone, but I'm also I really like smooth, and slightly emphasized mid-range sometimes. And so as a result, the vocals do come forward a bit. And if you're into, again, jazz music with vocals or anything where there's a really unique or present vocal line, you'll hear them very nicely with this, and even better than most other headphones, I think. And I want to say it's right in the mid-range. I don't know exactly where in the mid-range that addictive quality is, but it's probably dead center, if not slightly to the lower mid-range. And then you get into the highs, and this is where things start to get confusing because while the highs are... They have all the resolution and detail that you would expect from a high-end can. Actually, I'd say it's about the same as the Andromeda. If you like that kind of smoothness and resolution at the same time, no grain, no sibilance, this has exactly that. However, there's something to the highs that I'm unfamiliar with, and I believe that it has something to do with being used to the diffuse field loudness equalization of something like an HD 800 versus what's going on here, which I have no idea what the diffuse field equalization would be. And so it sounds different. It's not like it's worse or better, or it's just different from what I'm used to. And so, for example, if you take what I consider to be the headphone with the best highs I've ever heard, period, it's the Hi-Fi Man Sundara. And that one sounds very airy and open, and it's like somebody draped silk over your eyes and ears. And it's just so smooth and soft. And this is not that. This is all the same resolution, if not more. All of that is there. The detail is all there, micro detail, everything. But it's not like you're floating in a cloud of treble, of smoothness, of smooth treble. So there is something interesting, and maybe somebody can chime in, somebody in the comments can let me know what's going on here or why this sounds different. But I feel like it might also be because of the wood cups providing a little bit of that resonance and sweetness that I talked about. So as a result, what does this mean for the music that you're listening to? Well, I would say that this is probably not a very good headphone for metal music until you swap out to the icon pads. And then it takes some of it. It actually makes it sound like you're listening to a different headphone. But it makes it so that some of the harshness that you find in heavy metal music is not as harsh. But yet with all the other excellent qualities and properties of the headphones. So I almost feel like it brings down some of the resolution to the highs when you switch to the icon pads, or it just reduces the volume. So you're not hit with that extra resolution as strongly, which can make it a little bit more easy to listen to certain types of music, poorly recorded music, or music that has harshness to it. I am personally particularly treble sensitive, and I do not find, even with the Auteur pads, I think they're actually this is the better way to go. The Auteur pads it makes it sound more neutral and more correct. But with certain types of music, like the aforementioned, the icon pads might be the better choice, just because they're less fatiguing, or the detail that you might not want isn't as well represented as it would be with the Auteur pads. It is a really good fit for music with instruments, especially acoustic music. And so if you're listening to jazz, instrumental jazz, and again, this is in like the type of music that I happen to really enjoy, this is I think the perfect headphone. And not just that, it fits the part perfectly with the aesthetics, both visually and what you're listening to. Whether this is good for electronic music, EDM, bass heavy stuff, I want to say it actually probably is, because with that you're getting much cleaner tones, and you're not getting harshness from the recording quality, because a lot of it is you're not putting a microphone up to an amplifier or an instrument, right? It's a different process for how you make the music. And so I want to say it's actually probably pretty good for electronic music. And then in addition, if you put on, you can pad swap here, and I will show you this. But if you put on different types of pads, so for example, these ones are perforated, you'll be able to get a lot more bass. Like, I threw on some HM5s that are not perforated, and I was just like this is just intense. Like, the bass went way up. And so some people might want that. And you can do it with this, so that's nice. There are, I think if you get like one of the other ZMF headphones, they come with a different set of pads that's neither of these. And if you put those pads on here, it would be even bassier. I'm not sure, but from what I've tried with different pads, it's definitely flexible. So in a way, what you're getting with this headphone when you buy it, you're not getting just the Auteur. You're getting what the Auteur means. You're getting the ability to change the sound depending on the type of music that you listen to, the type of sound that you might want to get. So if you like something that's a bit warmer, you can just throw the icon pads on. But if you want more neutral, you can throw the Auteur pads on. If you want bass heavy, you can throw on some non-perforated, leather pads. So it's very customizable in that sense. And then we got to get to the pairings with different amps and DACs, and it's customizable there as well. You're going to get probably the best performance out of one of those top of the line, like high-end OTL tube amps. So those would do really well. I'm actually running this balanced off of a solid state amp. While it's great, I think it would still benefit from some of the euphonic properties of tubes, but not the kind that are like, warm and syrupy. I don't think it would do well with a dark voice, for example. I think you'd probably be better off with some of the higher end stuff. For comparisons to other headphones, the first one is the Focal Clear, and I did do a direct comparison between the two. The Focal Clear is it's got about the same resolution. Like I couldn't tell the difference. And once you start getting up into this category of resolution, like the higher end resolution, it's hard to tell the difference. Like if you go between this and the Clear and the HE1000 and LCD3s and LCD4s, resolution stops being a really important factor, like it would be if you're going up from like an X2 or like THX00. Then, once you're up into this category, resolution is just not as important because they're all really well resolving. So I'd say they're about the same between the Auteur and the Focal Clear in that regard. However, the Auteur it's got a bigger soundstage. It's wider. There's an intimacy to the Auteur that doesn't exist with the Focal Clear, but as far as like where you perceive the music to be, it's coming from a bigger spectrum. And the Clear has something weird going on in the mid-range, so the upper mid-range of the Clear. I preferred the Auteur in that regard. However, I think that the highs of the Clear, it was much closer to what I was used to. Yeah, with some of the Sennheiser stuff. So I think the Auteur wins just slightly because it doesn't have that weird mid-range stuff. And the bass on the Auteur is bigger, but it's not. It doesn't extend further than the Clear. I think the Clear might actually extend a little bit further in the bass. But yeah, that's about it. They're very close, I think. The HD800 and 800S. Yeah, this is. I don't actually consider them to be big competitors because if you want the HD800, you want something totally different. You want something that has the closest thing to a near field, imaging representation as possible. And whereas with the Auteur, you're more. I feel like you're more just there to listen to music. And I'm actually somebody who really enjoys the HD800. I think of Sennheiser's headphones, the HD800 and HD800S are the best ones. Like I'll take those over the 650 any day. And I mean, you probably said, well, obviously it's worth like way more money, but there are people who will claim that the 650 is the best of the Sennheiser lineup, or the 600 is the best with the right amping and whatnot. And to me, it's just no. Like I prefer the 800. However, it is a much more clinical headphone, and if you just want to listen to music, I think you'd probably be happier with the Auteur. Moving on, the Aeon Flow Open, my trusty planar. Yeah, so that's a faster headphone. But that's to be expected because it's planar. It's going to be faster. The Auteur's close in speed. It's close in transient response. And it's much more neutral. So that's one of the things about the Aeon Flow Open that it's not really controversial, but people who prefer neutral will find that it, because of the slight bass emphasis on the Aeon Flow Open, it's actually like mid bass emphasis there, that it muffles a little bit of it's not as clear. And when you do a direct comparison between the Auteur and the Aeon Flow Open, you absolutely notice a clarity increase with the Auteur. It doesn't have the same, like the Auteur is not as fast. It doesn't have the same punch, but I don't think anything has the same punch or has the same kind of speed as a planar. So it's probably, the Auteur is probably closest to the planar sound from a dynamic that I've heard. And I think they hit the target with trying to walk the line between dynamic and planar with it. So it's close, and then you get a lot more clarity from the Auteur. You do get a bit more resolution, but again, once you start getting into that range with the Aeon Flow Open, resolution stops mattering as much. You do notice a difference, and there are areas where I think the Aeon Flow would do better with certain types of music. Like, I think it just without swapping pads or anything like that, the Aeon Flow Open would probably do better with heavy metal music, poorly recorded stuff, because it's giving you a presentation that it's more forgiving. Like it's clinical for sure, and it's giving you all the negative aspects as well, but it'll make those errors less painful. All right, moving on. The Andromeda. So I think this is the best comparison. If you have a Campfire Andromeda and you're wondering what this would sound like in a full size or like an open back full size, this is it. The main difference, at least in terms of frequency response, it's the closest that I can compare it with. The main difference is the cup resonance property of the Auteur. And because obviously the Andromeda is an IEM, and it's a balanced armature IEM, and some people have said that the weakest point of the Andromeda is it doesn't have the same timbral qualities as dynamic drivers. I haven't personally heard that. I haven't noticed that, but it's, tough to compare IEMs. People aren't like willing to like easily lend you top of the line IEMs to compare with your top of the line IEMs. But yeah, maybe that's what they're talking about. The Auteur gets a little bit more of that sweetness. The tones are a little bit more distinct. All right, moving on. The HE500, the original audiophile introductory headphone. It's kind of a tough comparison. That both are good sounding headphones, but that one is a much more aggressive headphone. The Auteur refines everything, gives you probably a bit more resolution. Like I think it's maybe like 10% more resolution, maybe. But 5%, I don't know. It's pretty close, but slightly better. The bass on the Auteur is simply better. The HE500 had punchy, tight, well-controlled bass, but it was dry. The Auteur kind of makes the bass tones much more rich, and you're not just hearing, again, that the frequency go down. You're not just hearing a toneless kind of muffle at the low end. You're hearing an actual note. and that's the difference that immediately jumps out at you. By the way, I should also mention the HE500. I've since sold mine, so I had to compare with my friends, and he was using the Focus pads on them, so it's not the ones that you had like way back when they first came out. The HD650 this is the Auteur is often called an HD650 upgrade. I don't quite see it that way, because to me the 650 is still warmer than this, but that could just be me. And also it depends on the pairing of the 650, and I do not have a crazy again OTL amp, or the amp that might make the HD650 sound like an Auteur. And also the low end extends better on the Auteur. That's definitely. Now we're gonna conclude with the Sundara and the HEX V2. HEX V2 is a competitor to the Auteur for sure, but because it's in the same price category, but also because it's a planar that is also pretty close to the tonal properties of the Auteur, and of course the HE1000 is a competitor as well. It's tough for me to really say which one is better, because they're each going to be better in different things. So for example, the HEX V2 and HE1000 have slightly bigger soundstage, and the highs are again a more traditional, smooth, airy, open sounding. And of course, they do sound, they're like 100% open, so there is a bit bigger, bit wider of a experience head stage. But the Auteur has better bass, like substantially, and I prefer the mid range on the Auteur, especially with vocals. So I think what you get depends more on the type of music that you listen to. Like if you like classical music, you might actually prefer the HEX and 1000, just because of the treble qualities that they have there. If you prefer jazz or acoustic music or folk or even rock, the Auteur is going to be the better headphone. Anything with vocals, the Auteur is better than the HEX. And the Sundara, the Auteur is better in every respect except for the treble, the highs. And that's just because the Sundara is a freak of nature when it comes to the highs, and the way that I have no idea how they're able to do that. So if you're into classical music, the Sundara might be the better choice. But again, for everything else, the Auteur is going to be sound much better. And of course it should. It's like, again, twice the price. So not really that fair. One of many controversial subjects in the headphone community is whether or not upgraded cables or high-end cables make a difference or can make a difference when it comes to sound quality. And I'm on the fence about this because I'm more willing to trust the experts on this stuff who've done A/B comparisons or blind comparisons, who say that even though the difference is insignificant, there still is a difference, right? What they're saying is that it isn't that there is no difference. It's that it's a difference that's not worth the money that you spend on the cables. And I'm kind of right in line with that. Like, to me, there is a difference, probably, or it's a difference that it's tough for me to completely counteract the bias or the whatever the placebo effect might be, if there is one, which I'm sure there is for a lot of people, to the point where I can confidently say that there is a distinguishable improvement, or that I can tell you where that improvement is, because I can't. And especially without having done the blind tests myself, I can't tell you whether or not they are the cables are better. However, if you're going to buy a cable, buy it for reasons that are independent of the sound quality. I've seen videos where people talk about, or they're reviewing a headphone and they say, "Oh, by the way, if you're gonna get this headphone, make sure you use this crazy whatever cable that's made from yak fur." That to me isn't real. I can totally see the quality of materials that you're using in the cables making a difference in the end result for sound quality. I don't think that it's worth anywhere near the amount of money that's typically being charged for high-end cables. So, should you buy upgraded cables? Well, buy them if you think that they look cool, or that they might provide a either an aesthetic benefit or a weight benefit, because that's super important to me, or a convenience benefit. Buy them for those reasons. And then if you notice a sound quality improvement, then that's great as well. But for me personally, not having done those blind tests, I can't tell you whether or not there is a sound difference. And I think that anybody who says this without having done a blind test, like not taking the cables out and putting in the new cables, I mean literally having two different sets of the same headphone with two different types of cables in there, and then somebody just puts them on and says, okay, which is which. Most people who are telling you that there are benefits to cables they haven't done this kind of testing. And the people who have, they say that it's not worth the money. So in my mind, it is worth the money if you're buying it for other reasons. If you're buying it for sound independent reasons. And then if there happens to be a 0.5% increase in resolution, that's awesome, right? Now, feel free to chime in and correct me if I'm wrong on this, because if you have done that kind of testing and you have found the difference to be more than 0.5%, or like a very distinct difference, I would love to know or hear your story, or get a sense of your experience, or what it is that you're looking for or listening for. Because for me, it's within the margin of placebo, right? It sounds maybe a little bit better, but then it could also just be my bias, right? So that's kind of where I fall on the cable issue. Okay, so that just about does it for this review. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them. I'm really hoping to be able to audition this with a high-end top-of-the-line tube amp. I mean, these are supposed to go really well with the Amps and Sound stuff, but also other high-end like the Felix Audio stuff. It's just so hard to get that in Canada, and it's a real pain. So if somebody wants to lend me one, or if anybody lives in Canada near me, I'd love to go and give it a shot on those. If not, I'll have to wait until the monoprice Cavalli stuff comes out this summer. That should be interesting. I mean, I'm skeptical of monoprice stuff, but the amps are designed by Alex Cavalli, of course, and similar to the Mastrop Cavalli Tube Hybrid, I can expect them to be pretty good. I think they're releasing I don't remember, it's like Crimson and Platinum or something like that. And anyways, those are going to be tube amps that are affordable, so it'll be interesting. And if they're anything like the original designs, they should be pretty darn good for the price. So I'll wait until that, and then I'll probably pick one up. Other than that, if it turns out that those are not that great, I may just go for a Cavalli Tube Hybrid and pair it with that. Okay, that about does it. Thanks for tuning in.